Hello, I'm Zhang, Professor of Anthropology at UC Davis. I'm very happy to welcome you all to the weekly webinar of the Center for Chinese Studies at UC Berkeley. Our speaker today is Professor Mayfair Zhang from the Departments of Religious Studies and East Asian Studies at UC Santa Barbara. Professor Zhang received her Ph.D. in anthropology from UC Berkeley. She is the author of Gifts, Favors, and Banquets, The Art of Social Relationships in China, published in 1994, and the author of Re-enchanting Modernity in China, Ritual Economy and Religious Civil Society in Wenzhou, published in 2020. She is also editor of 3 volumes, Places of Their Own, Women's Public Sphere in Transnational China, Chinese Religiosities, Afflictions of Modernities and State Formation, and Chinese Environmental Ethics, Religions, Ontologies, and Practices. Professor Zhang was also Director for Asian Studies at the University of Sydney. And she has been visiting scholar at many institutions in the world. For example, the University of Michigan, University of Chicago, Harvard University, Academic Sinica in Taiwan, Beijing and Fudan Universities in China, the Institute for Advanced Study in Princeton, and the Max Planck Institute for the Study of Religious and Ethnic Diversity in Göttingen, Germany. So welcome, Mayfair.
Thank you very much, Lee. So it's the title is Significance of a Ritual Economy in the Context of Global Capitalism. And I want to first talk about how there's a lot of hybridity in the economy around the world. And Karl Marx, no less, noticed this back in the 19th century. And he said, capitalist economy allows insights into the structure and relations of production of all the vanished social formations out of whose ruins and elements it built itself up, whose partly still unconquered elements are carried along within it, whose mere nuances have developed explicit significance within it. And more recently, 2 feminist economists, they write under one name, J.K. Gibson Graham, said this: one might represent economic practice as comprising a rich diversity of capitalist and non-capitalist activities, and argue that the non-capitalist ones had until now been invisible, because the concepts and discourses that could make them visible have themselves been marginalized and suppressed. When non-capitalist forms of economy are coded as primitive, backward, stagnant, traditional, incapable of independent growth and development, and opposed to the modern dynamic capitalist economy, development is defined as a process that necessitates the elimination or transformation of non-capitalist forms. So this is the heart of what I'd like to get at today, to try to uncover, as I uncovered in my fieldwork, or it was staring me in the face. I could not help but notice it. These hitherto unnoticed, unacknowledged forms of past economic practices, still alive and going after the world's most tremendous state secularization drives of the 20th century. And one theorist who has been inspirational throughout this thinking is Georges Bataille. He came to a certain inspiration when he was a foot soldier on the front lines in World War I, and he saw massive death and destruction. And he had read a lot of anthropology of small-scale societies around the world. And his argument in The Accursed Share, Volume 1, is that modernity's overproduction produces dangerous elements that must be expended, or which is what he calls the accursed share, or it will explode into massive wars. So he had this kind of, one could say, kind of like a physics kind of argument about, the sun shines down and gives us so much energy. And what happens with industrial capitalism is capitalism requires endless growth and expansion. And with secularization and the loss of traditional ritual and religious consumption and expenditure, we've lost a major means of waste. So he valorizes wasteful consumption. Wasteful from a capitalist utilitarian point of view, these religious expenditures are considered wasteful. So we've lost the ability for wasteful consumption, that a kind of consumption that does not feed back into further production. So archaic societies engaged in ritual expenditures that got rid of the accursed share, that extra energy of that surplus production. And modernity focuses on endless production and reinvestment of wealth for further economic expansion. So he thought that the task for modernity was retrieve back that ability to really waste and have real loss. Loss such as archaic societies, they buried tomb treasures. In China, you have the Bronze Age, Qing Tongqi, the bronze ritual vessels that are buried. That it was great wealth, a lot of labor expended in creating those things. And they're buried and taken out of circulation. That is true waste. He also mentioned the Marshall Fund from the US to Europe after the World War II, and religious charities. And I would add that one could also easily adopt a Bataillean perspective and think about environmental expenditures today as putting a crimp in this zealous capitalist overproduction. So what I'm going to talk about today is one chapter. I believe it's, I can't remember which chapter, 10, I think, in my book, Re-enchanting Modernity. So since 1990, I've been doing field work, making fieldwork trips to Wenzhou, down in southeastern coast of China. And these are the various townships that I visited. So I mainly hung around in villages, rural places, and small towns, not in the big city of Wenzhou. That's small is beautiful is Schumacher's term, where he celebrated the small scale production because it enables more self-governance and local autonomy. And certainly that is the kind of production that I found in rural and small town Wenzhou. So in 1985, the term Wenzhou model, Wenzhou 模式, started appearing in Chinese media. And so Wenzhou had caught the eye of the central government, and they noticed how remarkable economic growth was, and prosperity was very evident in a place that in the 1970s was one of the poorest areas in China. So this Wenzhou model signified that a small-scale, privately owned, family-run enterprises. And it contrasted with the Fudan model, where it's local government running enterprises. It also was different from the Zhu River Triangle area model that is in the Shenzhen, Hong Kong, that area where the rapid industrialization, which relied on a heavy infusion of overseas Chinese capital or Hong Kong capital. So in the 70s, Wenzhou was very poor. Its traditional entrepreneurial culture had been suppressed in the Maoist state collective economy. But with the reform era, there was phenomenal economic development, and local governments from all over China went to Wenzhou to try to learn their secret, how they got out of rural poverty. And I would say that rural Wenzhou's economic development really harkens back and resonates with China's middle period of pre-industrial commercial and urban revolution, and that is the Song dynasty in the 11th to 12th centuries. It gave rise to tremendous social mobility back in the Song, as it does now. And it was the decline of the aristocracy. It was a highly commodified and money economy. Plenty of urbanization back then as now. And it led to widespread printing back then. And Chinese popular religion was also crystallized in the Song. So two books that really address this. One is Richard von Glan, his article, Towns and Temples in the Yangtze Delta, talks about the rapid religious as well as urban growth of that period. And Hill Gates also talks about petty commodity mode of production in her book, China's Motor. But she was more focused on economic and social developments, as well as her fieldwork based in Taiwan. So you know where this is coming from. This is the famous Song Dynasty painting of commercialization and urbanization. So beginning in the 80s, the term Wenzhou model mainly referred to the first four items: privatization, family enterprises and factories, household economy. It also referred to indigenous capital and an ethos of local economic initiative. So there were a lot of traditional rotating credit societies because these people were very poor. How did they get the capital to invest in their rural industries? And the local people are very proud of just calling it, with the Marxist term, primitive accumulation. And I describe in my book various things, besides the various forms of traditional rotating credit societies where 10 families get together, they all pool money together, and then they take turns borrowing from the pool, okay? And then the interest rate would be higher for the people who borrow first, and then very low for the people who borrow last. There is also the mobility of people and goods. So at any given time, out of 8 to 9 million Wenzhou people, residents, 1 or 2 million are traveling or living outside Wenzhou doing business. And also a lot of migrant laborers from poorer provinces make up about 1/4 of Wenzhou's population. And what you also have is a growth of specialized markets and new rural towns, highly commercial, rapid urbanization. So these are the general things people think about, whether in Western scholarship or inside China. Not mentioned about the Wenzhou model is number 5. What I plan to talk about is the ritual economy of ritual expenditures, gifts, donations, and sacrifices. All of these are economic expenditures and should be considered part of Wenzhou model. So here's shoes. Wenzhou is famous for shoes. This is a family-owned shoe factory making shoes, and still that is a very important industry in Wenzhou today. And this is a picture taken in the 90s. As you can see, the suanpan, the abacus, this is in the manager's office. And this is a street that arose out of rice paddies back in the 1990s. And you can see the beginnings of a trucking industry, shipping Wenzhou light industrial goods to all over China, Shandong, Shanghai, Chengdu, Guangzhou, and so forth. Back then, there were still pedicabs. Now it's rare. And here is the new fast train tracks that was built at the turn of the millennium. And these are two Song Dynasty pagodas, and they are dwarfed by the new modern structures. What we find in Wenzhou is a mutual embeddedness of economy, kinship, and ritual. So family businesses require not only economic capital and investments, but also ritual investments. And appeals need to be made to divine powers to establish a business, to maintain a business, to protect and expand a business, okay? Such as family-owned restaurants, factories, pharmacies, kindergartens, all these are local businesses. And ritual expenditures are considered part of the cost of doing business. If you're going to build a new building for your business, you need to have a feng shui master. You need to invest in making sure that your business is going to be successful. So an economic unit is a family, and families contribute to the lineage, which organizes rituals to feed and honor the ancestors who protect families and their economic well-being. So this is my question. What's missing in the Wenzhou model? What's missing is the ritual economy that people have not noticed. So here I found a passage in a Qing Dynasty travel log. And here I'll translate it. These are all characters referring to extravagance and wasteful. So 重费枉费, okay, heavy duty wastefulness. Okay, so here's the translation. The local custom of Wenzhou people is to support spirit mediums and communicate with spirits. They hold elaborate Buddhist and Taoist rituals, engage in extravagant expenditures, and exhaust their energies. Unconcerned with heavy-duty wastefulness, each year during the first lunar month, they hold a lantern festival that lasts 10 days. These attract festival goers late into the night, the men mixing freely with the women. That was a no-no back then from a conservative Confucian perspective. They also hold competitions of dragon lanterns with detailed handicraft. Several tens of gold pieces are wasted on a single large dragon lantern. Gongs and drums are beaten thunderously. The boisterous din is insane. In just a few days, the dragon lanterns are put to the torch. This sort of reckless wastefulness must be prohibited immediately. So this is from a kind of conservative Confucian perspective, and you can see already the Confucians had this attitude towards popular religions and rituals wastefulness. So, and it continues today, because one of the main things that local officials talk about is how, unfortunately, the local people are so wasteful. They should be reinvesting their wealth back into furthering and expanding production. So how do I define the ritual economy? They are expenditures of wealth that do not directly lead to profit accumulation. Indeed, they eat up one's profits and savings for non-utilitarian ends. So these expenditures include investments for rituals, gifts, charitable and temple donations, festivals, and religious structures and activities. And the ritual economy involves human transactions and economic exchange with the divine world of ancestors, gods, nature, spirits, and ghosts. It diverts a segment of wealth from this world and transfers it to the divine transcendent realm of the gods, so that sacrifice is an investment in the afterlife. There is a Buddho-Taoist logic of indebtedness for one's sins, whereby one can redeem sin with good deeds and donations to build up moral credit. So unlike the profit economy of the market, which stresses accumulation of wealth, the ritual economy expresses the logic of generosity, sacrifice, and self-abnegation, the willingness to part with one's material wealth or donate labor for higher transcendent ends. It can also interact with and feed into the market economy, because the ritual economy includes ritual businesses that sell ritual expertise and ritual goods. However, in this kind of the slight profit making, unseemly profit is discouraged because people will then think that your rituals are less efficacious. So here's a chart of all the things that I'd like to include in the Wenzhou's ritual economy: sacrifices, rituals, and festivals. And a lot of these are, people just very willing to take lots of money out of their private pockets and donate to community public festivals, as well as for private family interests when they make sacrifices to the gods for protection. They include ritual services like divination and geomancy, feng shui. It includes gift circulations, two types in terms of local categories. There's the songrenqing, life cycle gifts like for funerals and weddings and births and house building, as well as festival customary gifts. So the primary festivals such as Lunar New Year's, they have a fixed kind of gift due to custom that you're supposed to give. And then there are donations and charities of all sorts. And then the construction of ritual sites, which has been going on for 3 to 4 decades. So that each time I go back, there are new temples and new churches being built. So let's just show some photos. Here's a revived Wang lineage, sacrifice to ancestors that they've revived once a year. And they're dressed, the elders. So this is still a kind of rural kind of culture, but rapidly transitioning. And they where elders are still respected. And here are the elders, mainly men, because the lineage is patrilineal. But of course, they allow women to participate in lineage rituals and even on the board of the lineage. So they're dressed in Qing dynasty costume. And here is the sacrificial ceremony in progress. And so one of the offerings that are given to the gods and ancestors is ritual money. And so what's interesting is that in the scholarship tracing back the earliest ritual money, it predates, China invented paper money back in the Song dynasty. Ritual money, the earliest mentioning of ritual money in historical texts, predates paper money as legal tender by at least 400 years, if not earlier. Okay, so paper money, the idea of paper money was kind of like a shortcut to actual food or other kinds of offerings and sacrifices. And later, so it started as ritual and religion, then it became economic, as in paper money as legal tender. Here you have ritual containers. This used to be in the 90s. People used to bring their food offerings in these li sheng to the temples. They would also use them for life cycle rituals, to weddings and so on. But then with prosperity and the boom boxes, playing loud music and so on, they didn't fit into these things. So these things now have become antiques and are no longer used. A very important god that has risen up in importance is Wenzhou. He's the god of literature and education. And even though Wenzhou has had a very low educational level, everybody, including ordinary peasants, really value education as an avenue of upward social mobility. So here's a marching band. You kind of see a kind of Western influence here. That's a funeral, very elaborate. And here is, that was part of this Taoist funeral, which has a traditional Chinese sackcloth component too. Yeah. And this is kind of like a choir in a Taoist temple. It's called a scripture chanting group. And these women will spend hours practicing. Many of them who are semi-literate will have committed the scripture to memory. And others who are literate will just read and chant. So they intersperse with the Taoist monk who is conducting the ceremony. This is a Buddha's birthday celebration. And Buddhism is very big also in Wenzhou. And what's also interesting is that now you have some significant number of local officials who are sympathetic to Buddhism, if not Buddhist converts themselves. But they keep it quiet because officially Communist Party members are supposed to renounce any kind of religious affiliation. So this is a Buddhist water and land festival. And this is popular religion. This god is Wang Fuye. He's called the Wang family elder. And he's the biggest god in Wenzhou. And he's also a maritime god. He helps fishermen lost at sea. And this is at 2 a.m. New Year's Eve, Chinese New Year's Eve. And you can see that everyone wants to crowd in and get their fortunes told to see what this year is going to bring them in terms of luck. And they make many donations and burn a lot of incense and candles, which makes the temple a lot of money. So these are all religious expenditures that should be counted as part of the economy. This is Mother Chen. She and Guan Yin are the two goddesses who are most important in this area. Mother Chen is worshipped also in Taiwan and southeastern Chinese provinces. She's a martial goddess. She commands a spirit army with several generals and women soldiers, spirit soldiers. Here you can see her with the sword. She fights demons, and she also, took charge of her own reproduction. She slit her abdomen in order to abort her child so that she could sacrifice herself and help others in doing a rain dance to bring down rain to relieve a local community of drought. And she fought the snake demon. So yeah, this goddess is very important in this area. And so for many years, I longed to be able to witness this 7 days and 7 nights ritual chanting of her story. And finally, in 2012, I got wind that one was happening because it had been banned and local people were afraid to tell me whenever there was one performed. And finally, one person was brave enough to tell me because they felt that this is embarrassing, this is backward and superstitious. But this, again, this is whenever there is social strife or disease or something that is bothering a local community, they will do this ritual chanting, which takes a lot of time and wealth out of the capitalist economy. 7 days and 7 nights. And here's a paper snake at the end of the ritual. That snake is cut in half and burned and then put on a boat and sent out to sea. Here's Mother Chen. And all these are gods who serve her. So donations and charities. What was really remarkable I found was not only the self-generating grassroots self-organizing abilities of the local culture, but their generosity in giving. Now they can be very, chintzy and, always arguing with their laborers and workers. So they're good capitalists in that respect. On the other hand, when it comes to giving out to the local community, they're very generous. And these are 4 motivations that I perceive that pushes them to give. One is accumulating merit for the afterlife. One is the repentance for sins that they've committed. When you do business, you often incur some sins. So they give back in this way. One is to express gratitude to the gods and Buddhas for protecting them and granting their wishes. And fourth is also you gain social prestige in this life, in your local society by being generous. They've revived the old late imperial custom of writing down the names of big donors and carving it into stone stelae. So everywhere you temples you will, and lineage ancestor halls, you will find this. And now you also have large Buddhist temples and monasteries. This Buddhist temple is a Chan temple, and with priests, Buddhist monks and nuns. It has a long venerable history and is in historical texts. And this abbot has been a good leader, and I noticed that he has many wealthy people, like big officials, as well as entertainment media people and wealthy entrepreneurs and factory owners come visit him. And he gives a lot of psychological counseling from a Buddhist point of view, and they make very generous donations. Of course, he's not going to be telling me how much. Okay, so construction of ritual sites. So many. Here's a ordinary Zhang lineage ancestor hall. Here's a Chen lineage ancestor hall. Does it look familiar to you? It's very much fashioned after Tiananmen in Beijing. You've got the little bridges and you've got the gate. And here, what really shocked me were these plaques. If you get a close-up view, it says Chinese, such and such township, Chinese Communist Party branch. Okay, so within ancestor lineage ancestor hall, you have the 3 Communist Party village organizations located within an ancestor hall. And I said to them, how can this be? How can they allow this? And they replied, well, all our Communist Party officials are surnamed Chen too. However, later they changed it. Okay, so I think there was pressure from above. All right, so here is an opera stage. So temple activities are often very festive and fun. So you have local opera troops traveling around. This is part of the economy, building a new temple. You have craftsmen doing beautiful art and getting paid. This was the book cover for my book. This is the inside ceiling of a temple. And you have all this artwork done on temples, providing jobs. And another kind of construction are tombs, family tombs. So you have see this figure here, that means that it's slated for destruction. So it's a cat and mouse game. These are illegal tombs, but people want to do it. So they go into the mountains and do it, and then it'll last until the next campaign to eliminate tombs. And the local officials send out wrecking crews. So this creates anger, of course, but they wait until the atmosphere changes, the political winds change, and then they go back and do it again. So it's a constant cat and mouse. This is a Taoist priest who designed, very proud of his Taoist temple, and you can see that it's a miniature temple of heaven. So their aspirations are very big. So this is a Taoist temple that he collected money for and has designed and built. And inside, it's a temple to the Jade Emperor, which is the highest deity, popular religion deity. This is a 5-story Guanyin Bodhisattva hall. And the person who was the point person for accumulating funds was the local village chief. So I don't have time to, this is a church, Catholic church we built. So this was a woman who was a laoban, a boss, and she's owns a mine. And every year she comes back and she throws a gigantic banquet with luxury food for her co-villagers and her relatives. So this is giving back your wealth to the community. And you have a dragon boat festival where there's an exchange of gifts. And so dragon boats are not about Qu Yuan. This is a local kind of custom. And so men from one village will row to the village where they have a lot of married out daughters from their village. And the married out daughters in this other village will lay out altars of food to greet them and also give the rowers gifts. So you can see that this is a kinship ritual of a final kin where they're crossing territory, village territory, and interacting with a final kin. Then there are ritual services. So feng shui is very big. So locating your tomb, you need a feng shui master with his magnetic needle compass. Compasses were invented by the Chinese. This is a Taoist funeral, and it's a Buddha Taoist where the Buddhist and Taoist rituals are mixed together. This is a home-based divination consulting business. People are very concerned about the coming exams at different levels for their children. And these are pleas to the gods. My child is sitting at desk number, A4. Please help him or her. And you have a lot of ritual healers and spirit mediums. So this is one that I interviewed, and she also heals people. So here's a scriptural chanting service. If you don't have time to chant scriptures, which will earn you merit, then you can pay somebody to do that. So she's chanting a Taoist scripture, and then each chant for X number of minutes would mean that she dots one of these white dots with red ink. Okay, once this is finished, and it's usually many, many hours of chanting, and it's worth a certain amount of money, and then you take it and you burn it to the god that you're supplicating. So I wanted to give an example of the interpenetration of ritual and productive economic logics. So I interviewed this woman who talked about those dotted paper records of chants, and she called it cash, 钞票, or currency, 货币, which means that they are convertible from the number and duration of chants to an economic value to a spiritual credit and a ritual investment of wealth. She also distinguishes between giving 人情, life cycle rituals, like when you attend somebody's funeral, which she says that those, when you give 人情, those are understood as an investment or a loan. They're just like an investment or a loan, she says. And it's different from donating money to temples and making offerings to the gods. She said, with 人情, you get it paid back the next time your own family has a wedding or funeral. So there's no trade imbalance or trade deficit, 贸易逆差. However, with donations to temples or offerings to gods, you do not get that money back. Okay, so in the native categories of thought, the latter kind of generosity is more like true loss in Bataille's sense, or true wasting of wealth, which will not generate material returns in this life. So this kind of intertwining of economic language and religious logic traces back to the Song Dynasty commercial revolution, in which the religion and economy and commercialized economy were very much intertwined. So we have Cynthia Brokaw, who wrote the book Ledgers of Merit and Demerit, in which back in late imperial times, virtue is quantifiable, right? So you write down all the virtues, all the different virtuous deeds you've done, and they're worth points. And then you write down your sins and their demerits. So you have this quantifiable virtue, and it shows the intertwining of religious and economic logic, which is still going on today. In fact, at the city god temple in Jinxiang Township, it used to have a giant abacus on the wall outside, because the city god will calculate each person's merits and demerits to set the punishment in your afterlife. Yeah. Okay, so now I'm at my conclusion, which is about the virtues of non-productive ritual expenditures in a capitalist economy. I would argue that the ritual economy engages in a reversal of Max Weber's Protestant ethic, which became a disenchanted modern capitalist productivism, according to Weber. So, you know, I really want to write against those who just take Weber's Protestant ethic and say, oh, yes, we have the equivalent of the Protestant ethic in China. It's the Confucian ethic. The problem is that for much of China's history, Confucians before modern times were very anti-commercial. Okay? So in Wenzhou, though, what you have is something quite different from the Protestant ethic. It's not just by working hard that one gains security about one's supernatural destination or predestination, as the Calvinists believed. One must be willing to sacrifice a portion of one's material wealth, labor, and time to the ritual economy to assure a better afterlife. And that's the main motivation. Acquisition is not the predominant end game, although, of course, in this transitioning, that could be changing as Wenzhou becomes more urbanized. So acquisition is not the only or the predominant end game, but a strategy to a different end. That is ritual consumption, especially public community consumption and donation, to build up divine credit to make compensation for one's deficits of sins. So to assure one's own and one's family's cosmic destiny, giving away wealth in donations to temples and monasteries, charities, and making sacrifices and offerings, and giving Ren-qing gifts to relatives and the local community, and giving donations to support festivals and rituals, and engaging in merit-making activities. These are all effective measures to ensure both your family's temporal as well as cosmic destiny. So for Bataille, modern societies have lost the ability to engage in non-productive consumption, which he thought was a healthy human propensity for squandering excess wealth found in traditional religious sacrifices, and the building of great religious monuments. So archaic and traditional societies for Bataille knew how to counterbalance productive activities with non-productive ritual expenditures. So from his experience on the battlefields of World War I, he realized that it's because modernity keeps on focusing on productive activities and ever-growing, ever more profit accumulation, and it has lost the ability to squander wealth. That kind of physical imbalance where you accumulate so much surplus wealth, you're bound, it has to find a way to expend, to get expended. And warfare is the worst kind of wasteful expenditure and destruction. And so that's why modern society has been beset by such large scale, very destructive warfare. So in modernity, we are trapped in alienated servitude of endless labor in our distorted overdevelopment. So we're left with only one channel for dissipating excess accumulated energy, and that is warfare. In conclusion, unlike the Protestant ethic, which led to the emergence of capitalism in Western modernity through disenchantment, de-ritualization, and iconoclasm, in post-Mao Wenzhou, we see that economic development and commerce are brought back along with, even because of, the reinstallation of divinities and rituals. Although the ritual economy can mesh with capitalism, it still harbors an internal logic whose genealogy traces back to the Song. It has not been fully overtaken by the unilateral profit and accumulation motive, but poaches on the territory of both state capitalism and liberal capitalism and offers a challenge to their logic. All right, thanks so much for your patience in sitting through this. So now I can stop share.
Thank you so much, Mayfair, for such a wonderful and stimulating talk. And I just want to, there are already questions in the Q&A, but I want to just make a quick comment and then take advantage by asking you the first question.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Yeah, you know, your book, I'm still reading here, is such a remarkable achievement. And it's a culmination of so many years of research and thinking. And I just really love reading it. It's theoretically engaging and ethnographically rich. And also, you always ask big questions. Mayfair's work is always like that. Ask big questions about modernity, secularization, ritual economy, and so on. So I highly recommend the book. But let me just ask you one question here. I have a lot of questions, but I'll pick one. So I very much like how you expand Bruno Latour's notion of modernity as a purification process by really bringing our attention to the separation of the supernatural from nature, culture, human, non-human worlds. I think it's a very important point, which, has been neglected by some other scholars. And also, I very much agree with you that the purification or secularization process in 20th century China was much more brutal and radical than many other places. So, but we also know that this process was uneven in China. So if you look at rural versus urban, different regions, right? And also it's an incomplete process, or sometimes the activities were simply driven underground, but still very much there. And on top of that, we also know the degree to which capitalist engagement vary very differently across different regions, as you already showed in the beginning, different economic models. So my question here is, can you tell us a little bit more about how this uneven process and uneven engagement with capitalism might have affected the forms and impacts of the post-Mao re-enchantment practices? In other words, I'm curious whether the ritual economy you describe here in Wenzhou is unique, or there are different forms of ritual economies emerging in China. So yeah, I'll leave
Okay, great. Yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for your comments. I did my field work in Wenzhou. I have since then also made a short trip to the Chengdu area, and I've visited. Let's see what other areas. So I would say that Wenzhou is pretty distinctive and special. One, because of its geographical isolation that warded off all the waves of state secularization of the 20th century, of the long 20th century. So it's surrounded by mountains on the land side, and then it's got the ocean on the other side. And it only got the airport in the 90s, and then the train later. Okay, so it was shielded. There was a long, windy, nauseating mountain road. And so it was shielded by those officials coming down from the north. Second, Wenzhou language is, as everybody complains, totally undecipherable to others. Even very close people like Hangzhou is very close, totally incomprehensible. So that, of course, also shields Wenzhou and allows them to maintain the traditional culture longer, and unify them too, and give them a common identity. So I would say that other places, especially like Northeast, is much more affected and much more secularized. I think that Chengdu has a lot of traditional culture, and Chengdu is, of course, is the birthplace of popular Taoism. And I would say that Fudan is also very strong in traditional culture and popular religion. And certainly Taiwan is very strong in popular religion. And Chiang Kai-shek tried to push Christianity there and didn't succeed. So maybe Yunnan, but you would be more familiar with Yunnan, parts of Yunnan, you have more ethnic minority cultures there that are more intact. So those are the areas, I think, in China. I have visited Jiangxi too, and Taoism, of course, because of Longhu Shan, Dragon Tiger Mountain, is That's a Taoist center. And I have visited temples in Jiangxi. And for example, that Mother Chen is also worshipped in Jiangxi. So I guess Jiangxi is also fairly strong. Jiangxi is also more rural than the rest of China. It's very poor. It's been very poor since the building of the Grand Canal that was in late imperial China. So those are the areas where popular religion are still going strong.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So let's turn to the questions. So yeah, I just want to tell the audience, if you wish, just keep writing, typing in the Q&A, and I'll be reading out loud to Mayfair. So the first question comes from Jacqueline Menzini. The question is, have you done any comparative analysis between ritual expenditures and the early Catholic Church's practice of indulgences, which inspired the Protestant Reformation?
Oh, excellent. Actually, if you read the introduction of my book, I talk about Catholic indulgences because I gave this talk, where was it, in Belgium? And one theologian stood up and asked me that very question. He said, it sounds like Catholic indulgences. And definitely, so I have this whole argument that I could develop about the Protestantization. I'm teaching a graduate seminar now, and we are reading Webb Keen, a theoretical anthropologist who did field work in Indonesia, an island there, and talks about the Dutch Calvinist missionaries and how they were offended by the local quote unquote superstitions, which they also called fetishisms of, and so there, Webb Keen also uses Latour's argument about purification. So purification, one can see that Protestantism is a major purification in separating spiritually charged objects from humans, and separating humans from God. So Protestantism got rid of all those saints, which they thought was a kind of slipping back of polytheism, and they called it heathenism or idolatry. That language of heathenism and idolatry entered into China and really influenced a whole generation of modern Chinese elite reformers and later revolutionaries. Okay, and the language of superstition was also Protestant. Protestants called the Catholics, who were so into rituals, orthopraxy. The Protestants were into belief and idolatry. I mean, the Protestants were into belief and doctrine. Okay, so they their definition of religion is faith. Okay, which is something very mental. It's about the ideas and the head, whereas Catholicism shares very much with Chinese popular religion the emphasis on ritual. And the Chinese gods are very similar to Catholic saints. Most Chinese gods, if they're not nature gods, were at one time human beings way back in history. Many of them have recorded histories. They did something really beneficial to humankind. They sacrificed themselves, they gave of themselves, and after they die, they become like saints. They are elevated into gods. A temple gets built around for them, and then a cult develops and may eventually get recognized by the imperial court. So yeah, so definitely there was this kind of Protestantization throughout 20th century China.
Great. So the next question comes from Jianye He. For big community ritual events in Wenzhou, how the share of contributions is decided, based on family income or decided by the leader of the lineage?
Yeah, there's they also have since the 1980s, local organizations that are kind of grassroots organizations called 老人协会, old people's associations. These are generally retired people, usually men, because it's a traditional culture, so men are more in the public sphere, and women, the old women, will tend to stay at home or hang out in temples counting their prayer beads. But the men, especially if they used to hold more prominent positions before they retired, they would be very active in soliciting donations. They will go door to door. And they know the people they're asking for. So there's a give and take. Usually the expectation is that if you're wealthy, you should give more. And people will whisper behind your back that, you know, you're very miserly if you don't give more, right? So, but it depends. Sometimes really poor old ladies, those are the biggest givers because they have the religious devotion. They are more devoted and more self-sacrificing. Yeah. So it all depends. Sometimes you, as a big person, a man, a prominent person, you want to give a lot because the more you give, the higher your social status, right?
Okay, so the next question also comes from Jianye He. What are the local government's responses toward the ritual activities? Some activities are common superstitions.
Well, I write in my book that the term superstition has started to decline in usage, and it is being replaced by 民间信仰, popular religion, or popular customs, or 风俗, popular. That's a late imperial term, older term. So what has changed the local government's attitudes towards these wasteful expenditures a lot is the intangible cultural heritage movement by UNESCO, where you know, each locality in China competes to get their local custom or ritual or folklore or whatever included on this list, and then that brings in tourism. So now popular religion, especially religious festivals, is tied in with the profit economy in this kind of complex way. So, I mean, on one hand, it does depend still on a lot of donations. On the other hand, local officials have changed their attitudes because it can enrich their coffers, right? Having all these tourists come in to look at the colorful traditional rituals.
Interesting you mentioned tourism because Nelson Greenberg was here, but he had to leave early. But he mentioned you forgot tourism.
Yes. Okay.
So I guess he's curious that what's the relationship, between tourism and the ritual economy.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Okay, the next question comes from Kristen Stapleton. He says, thanks for the interesting talk. 2 questions from a historian to an anthropologist. First, I noticed you did not invoke the concepts of social capital and cultural capital. Are they useful for understanding Wenzhou culture? Second, I found your comment about environmental concern as a sort of valuable waste really interesting. Are Wenzhou religious organizations taking interest in environmental issues?
Okay, social capital, cultural, and okay, yeah, those terms are too secular for me because I'm dealing with religion and ritual. These are people who believe, who anticipate an afterlife that they need to prepare for. And they have sightings of gods and goddesses. So the gods and goddesses are present. Then they appear to some chosen people and speak to them about, hey, when are you going to build a temple for me? And I'd like a temple that looks like this, and I'd like a statue to me that looks like this. These things cost money. So appearances can often trigger some major self-sacrifice. So that's why cultural and social capital don't really work for me. I would prefer to use the word ritual capital or ritual economy, or religious imaginary, and so forth. And the other question was about environment. Yeah, I really like Bataille, but he's not that well known because, Foucault read him, but he's not that well known because he's not a systematic thinker. He had great ideas, but then he was kind of restless, so he moved on to other things. So I thought about waste, the whole concept of waste. And so now we're facing this incredible environmental challenges for the whole globe. And so maybe I thought maybe I should chuck Bataille because he's celebrating waste. How can we? But it's waste from the point of view of a utilitarian, profit-driven, endless production kind of capitalism. So we have to understand waste in that way, right? And so anything that puts a dent in the lasting, constant growth and expansion of capitalism and production would be helpful for the environment. So any kind of environmental measure, the profit makers would consider wasteful, right? Because it's not leading to more profits and more growth. It's putting a crimp in their style. So we can, Bataille wasn't thinking about the environment. He didn't have that problem back then. Mm-hmm. So, but this is a way to make Bataille relevant by talking about waste.
Yeah, interesting. So there's a quick question from the earlier Jacqueline Mazzini says tourism, just a clarification, tourism from where? Just from within China or other country as well? Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, Wenzhou does not have that much international tourism. It's mainly domestic and mainly Wenzhou actually. Yeah, so just the local Wenzhou people will travel to different temples in different parts of the Wenzhou region. And they will spend money that way, right? So there's very local tourism as well as some tourism from other parts of China. Yeah.
Interesting. So these are the end of the questions in the box. Are there any questions? Yeah. I'm curious also, Mayfair, would you say the ritual economy in China is largely a rural phenomena, or in the urban area we also have ritual economy, but a very different kind?
I would say it's there also in urban areas. But in urban areas, they're more secular people. So most people won't go to temples. But some urban areas do have lineage or clan organizations. Yeah, and then lineage and clan organizations are organizing themselves. I interviewed a young lineage, local young lineage, not the same as mine, and they showed me this fantastic photo of them in a rented hall in the Renmin Dahuitang, the People's Congress. They rented one to have a national meeting of young lineage people dispersed, right? So you can have, that kind of a scale. And now I would imagine that as China becomes more prosperous, these older practices come back to life, that more of the urban areas will get involved, and it will be on a larger scale, even global, because all these lineages are just waiting to get reconnected with their far-flung, globally dispersed kin. And they're looking for them. In Wenzhou, they're looking for their kin in Taiwan, in Southeast Asia, and so forth.
Right. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank you, Mayfair, again for a wonderful talk and for this fascinating discussion here. And also thank you everyone for coming. Please also join the center next week for a talk by Manfred Estrom on workers and change in China. So once again, thank you all and good night.
Thank you.